It's time to get started. Welcome to my session about Nuxt for Drupal developers, or modern frontend without the JavaScript jungle. Maybe shortly about me. My name is Wolfgang Ziegler, or fago on D.O. I'm managing partner and CTO of Nuxt, a Vienna-based Drupal company. You may know me from some of my past contributions, like I worked a lot on Entity API, like Drupal 8 Entity API, and also Type Data API in core. And like in the past, I did a bunch of quite popular Drupal 7 modules, like rules, also Entity API and Drupal 7 field collection. Nowadays, I'm mostly focused on working on Lupus decoupled Drupal. It's our decoupled Drupal stack. And you can find me on Blue Sky and also, of course, on D.O. So before we get started, really, I would like to learn a little bit about you and what's your experience. So could like everyone who would consider themselves as a frontend developer raise its hand? Okay, quite a bit. And how many of you would say you have experience like working with React or like Vue.js, some other modern JavaScript framework? Also quite some, okay, but almost not everyone. Okay, good to know. So this here is about Nuxt. Why Nuxt? So first of all, Nuxt is a Vue framework, so it's built on top of Vue.js. And like the really nice thing about Vue.js, I think, is its simplicity. It's really easy to get into and to get start learning it. Also like Nuxt, like Vue.js, has really pleasant developer experience. It's really easy to work with. It's performance focused, production ready, and also versatile. So with Nuxt you can do content sites, but also like full applications, e-commerce websites. And it has a very vibrant and active ecosystem. So there's a thriving community, there are regular updates. So like there are, I think, monthly minor releases with always like some nice features without breaking changes. So that's like really well done. So to get started with Nuxt, you start a new project by doing npm create Nuxt latest, and it will ask you a couple of questions, and you are ready to go. And then you just start your dev server with npm run dev. It just starts your local development server. The typical thing, as you might know it from the JavaScript world, with hot module reloading and everything. It just refreshes whenever you do a change. Quite convenient, but also nothing surprising. So like when you have a Nuxt project, basically it's gonna look like this. So like with most of the folders being optional, I would say that the most important ones is actually the components folder, which is like where your Vue components will go into. Then there's the pages folder. It's also a folder made out of Vue components, but it's special components which basically auto-register your routes. Like for every file you put in there, Nuxt will automatically register a route. Like if you put like a file blog.vue in there, /blog will be available in your application, and it will load that Vue component. And then of course there's like this central Nuxt configuration file where all the Nuxt configuration goes into. So like with Nuxt being a Vue.js framework, it's of course important to have at least like fundamental knowledge of Vue.js if you work with it. And like a nice thing, as I said before, Vue.js is also like easy to get into, and that is also a thing because Vue.js, I would say, is web standard oriented. So it doesn't try to reinvent all the thing. It doesn't try to make everything JavaScript, I would say. Or for like with Vue single file components. Like it's processed by JavaScript, but still it doesn't feel like you're not writing JavaScript all the time, right? So as I said, Vue single file components are a thing. So it's basically a special file format that Vue invented. It's the way you can do like in one file an HTML template, CSS and JavaScript, and it just gets processed by the framework. So in the end, it's taken care of you. And you can see it like a template file. So it contains your HTML template and just contains CSS. And actually the JavaScript part of it, it's optional. You can do it, and of course you can do a lot of it, but you don't have to. And of course, there's like the Views documentation website, which contains lots of good documentation. But let's cover the most important things here, just to have a good foundation. Like Vue.js component model, like Vue.js components, you can just in part, like in your Vue component, you use other components, but just using the markup syntax like that. As most of you probably know it, very convenient to just reuse components like this. You can just pass values with props to components and special syntax. If you put a colon in front of the prop, the value of the prop will actually be JavaScript evaluated before it's passed to the component. So this 1 plus 2, it actually will be evaluated to 3 and then passed to the component like this. So the model works like this. You pass the data down via props, and like if you would like return some data to the calling component, you could like do this like with emitting events. Like the child component can emit an event, which then the parent component can consume and React submit to something with the data. So this is an example of how a Vue.js component could look like. As I said, there's like an HTML template part, which is in the bottom. But here we also have like a JavaScript part in the top, which in the end is just containing the definition for the properties that we have in this component. So it just defines two props, like a title prop, subtitle, both strings. The one has a default value, the other one not. And that's really it's about it. Like the props are automatically registered, and you can just use it as variables in your template. So that's really the fundamental thing on how you would do a Vue component. But there also like is more templating syntax, which is good to know. As we already have seen, like you can just interpolate values. You can also bind attributes to some data. As mentioned with the special colon syntax, the value is JavaScript evaluated. So you can have variables like image URL and will just assign the value of it to the source attribute of the image. You can have like event handling with the shortcut of having like the add in the name, like add click automatically registered the click event on a button, and it will evaluate the JavaScript count ++ whenever the button is clicked. Yeah. Then of course there's control flow, there are conditionals, like there's an if and else, list renderings, the things you need. And as you see, like Vue uses a notation which is also like valid HTML. That's like quite a little bit maybe weird to have the v-if and the v-else as part of your tags, but that way it's ensured that's also valid HTML. And that's the case because you can just have Vue templates also shipped to your browser and evaluated in your browser if you like. That's not necessary if you like write Vue single file components with Nuxt, but that's also something that you can do. So Vue.js is a reactive JavaScript framework, I would say. So it handles reactivity for you automatically. And the way it does it is in that basically Vue-free wraps objects with refs. So it's a special function. You pass it on an object and you get back a wrapped object. And that way, basically, Vue tracks the usage of the objects and the dependencies with the refs. So whenever you use it then in your template, Vue knows that it's used there, and it basically for you builds the tree of dependencies. And whenever something changes, it knows exactly where it was used and what to change and what to update. So that's quite convenient, actually, but also something, of course, you have to know that like the objects are wrapped in the refs. And for actually updating the DOM, Vue like React uses a virtual DOM, so it's like efficiently done. It only actually applies the updates to the DOM as necessary. So this is a simple example of Vue.js reactivity. So we just define a variable count at the top. It's a ref which is initialized with 0. And with 0, the template gets rendered the first time. And then every time you press the button, the value will be increased by 1. And it will just directly evaluate this and run in the browser. Okay, so far, like that was Vue. Let's enter Nuxt. How can you work with Vue components in Nuxt? So first off, Nuxt has auto imports. It basically saves you from doing imports manually, as you can see here. Like with plain view, you would have to import every component that you would like to use in your template. Like the header, when you would like to use that component in your template, if you would have to import it, Nuxt takes care of that for you automatically. So it just has that components folder, whatever component you put in there, it's automatically registered and you can just use it without an import. But it's quite handy because in practice else you would end up with having a lot of manual work with the imports. Even if IDEs can take care of it, it's just like a lot of boilerplate you can save. Then CSS handling, of course, it's like very easy to just define some global CSS files with Nuxt. But then, as mentioned, the view single file components also have a CSS part, so you can just add the pair component CSS in the view files. And then also Nuxt takes care of processing that CSS. You can also like enable an option to inline styles. So like on the first page you load from Nuxt, you just have the critical CSS inlined. And since the CSS is processed, you can just install some Nuxt modules to do some sort of CSS processing, like some post-CSS processing, or like to enable Tailwind, or have like SAS processing. So you can just extend that, and there are also modules for that. It's quite convenient to have those things just available and very easy to use. Another nice feature is that you can have scoped component styles. So, but just by applying the attribute scoped here, like as part of the style element, Nuxt will automatically take care of scoping the CSS, so it only applies to this component. So you don't have to worry about global CSS and prefixing the CSS name so that you don't have conflicting CSS and things like that. With the scoped, that's automatically taking care of you. So I mentioned there's also like Tailwind CSS. So there's a Nuxt module which you can just install in your Nuxt application. Tool Nuxi, which also takes care of adding Nuxt modules. So you can just do npx Nuxi add Tailwind, and it will download and install the module for you. And basically with the default configuration, you can already start using it and just use utility classes from Tailwind, and they just work. So like in this example, you could just apply inline block, and if you like Tailwind CSS, then as it's quite popular also in the modern JavaScript work, it's quite handy to have. Client-side navigation obviously is also a thing with Vue.js, and also comes automatically set up and configured with Nuxt. So basically with client-side navigation, the first load, it basically loads the application, but from there you can just click on the link, and instead of like loading the whole page again, it will just navigate to a new route in the existing application, change whatever needs to be changed. What feels for the user much more quicker because it doesn't like reload the whole page. So it's really actually feels very fast and fresh from a user perspective. So as mentioned, it's built into Nuxt. It's based up Vue router library, and it also is done with best practices very nicely. So basically, like if the user has no JavaScript, it falls back to regular links, and it still works just with a full page load, but it still works. For the usage, there's like a special component provided by Nuxt link, which you can just use to make client-side navigation enhanced links, and you just you could use it like in this example. Basically in the to attribute you pass the name of the route you want to link to, and Nuxt will take care of creating the link for you. And as said, by default it will do client-side navigation. Without JavaScript it's a regular link. But also if your JavaScript is enabled, the nice thing it also is that it also takes care of prefetching those links, so the links actually feel very fast by default. So prefetching is a nice feature which is also built in there and activated out of the box, but you can also control it and disable it on some links, of course. But it's also very handy and nice for performance. Nuxt image module is also like a nice helper module which is available. Basically, it's not something you would have or you need to use with Drupal images, because like Drupal images, they are already processed by Drupal. But maybe like you want to have some static images or like some fixed images in your web application, then this is also very handy. Basically, you can pass it a local image, and it takes care of the automatic format conversion for you. It generates all the required image sizes. It also has support for responsive images, so it generates like multiple image sizes as needed. And it does that with a bunch of configurable providers. So by default, it also has some tools such that it does that locally. But you can like configure it. I don't know, I use this image CDN, it does it for me. And then it will just use that image CDN and produce the right URL such that the CDN is taking care of the image conversion for you. So that's also quite handy. SVG icons, there's like a Nuxt icon module, which is quite nice for using icons, in particular ones of the already available open source icon sets. So there's this iconers.js.org website, which is basically a huge library of available open source icons. And all of those icons you can just use very easily with the Nuxt icon module. Basically, there's an icon component, and you give it the name, and the name of the icons you can also look up on the website, and you can use it like this. I think actually the color attribute is wrong here. That's not a thing. But you can just, since it's an SVG icon, you can just change the color with CSS. So that's very easy and straightforward to use. And you can also add your own custom icons via view components, of course. So you can just use a view component to create an SVG, and you can use it on its own or also via this icon helper. For web fonts, there's also a Nuxt fonts module available, which is quite cool because web fonts, it's quite hard to do web fonts right, I would say. And it's just very helpful to have it basically all done by the Nuxt fonts module. It supports quite some font providers like Google, Adobe, FontShare, or you just can also give it your custom web font file. But also in particular for the font providers, it's also nice that it has an option that you can also do like local or like static hosting of your web fonts. So basically, if you would like to use a Google web font, it would copy it to your local Nuxt application, so it's served from your domain and not from Google's domain. And then it does automatic font metric optimizations to avoid the layout shift. So basically, when by default you lazy load the web font for better performance, it's not there immediately. So there might be some layout shift, like as soon as the font is loaded and the font is changed in the browser. So that's taken care of by having fallback fonts which have the same size as the web font. Then the layout is not shifting. And also Nuxt does that. Font metric optimization for you. So very handy. Nuxt scripts is one of the more new helper modules available for Nuxt, which helps with third-party scripts. It has, I think, 42 third-party scripts providers already implemented, like there are options for analytics, maps, Google Maps, video, YouTube. Like the most common ones are there. It's of course, you can also add, like it's extensible, you can add your own, but it's already quite convenient, like that the most common ones are implemented. And that said, it just really helps you with using third-party scripts in a good way, such they are not hurting your website's performance. You might know it, you take care of a website, it's running perfectly fine, and then the client comes and wants to have a lot of third-party scripts which damage the performance of your website. So that helps with that. It takes care of loading the third-party scripts after rendering, so it's not blocking, but also like it's not delaying the rendering of Nuxt. And it also provides some facade components, which you can also integrate with user consent. So facade components is basically, for example, if you think about a YouTube embed where you would have YouTube and you want to show like a video that people can play. It would not like immediately load the YouTube JavaScript, but have like a locally rendered facade, which just makes clear, okay, here's the video and people can click on it. And once they click on it to play it, only then it will actually switch it out and embed the real YouTube JavaScript. And since that is also like loading third-party JavaScript, potentially is a cookie problem, you can also very easily integrate it with user consent and with your cookie consent solution so that it's done properly. Optionally, you can bundle and load the scripts from your server, which is not something for every third party, but for some it's also. So some of the API might change, but it's already pretty good and stable. So I think it's fine to use. Yeah, that's it. Demo time. Let's take a look at how Nuxt actually looks and feels. You can actually launch the demo yourself if you like. So on nuxt.com, there's an example section. And below features there is auto imports, and this is the demo I'd like to show here. But basically it's just using StackBlitz, which is running web containers in your browser. So you just very easily can launch a Nuxt application in the browser and play with it. What's quite convenient to take a quick look at it. So I'll just take that and open it. So this is basically it. Let's load it again. You see it basically starts up this environment here where you have like an editor on the left. It's putting up the thing on the right, and in the terminal you see it's already launched. It's starting like with an npm install and then does an npm run dev. So it's starting the dev server and boots it up. Then you see this is like the loading screen of Nuxt. And once it's booted up, we should see this demo application here. This is the app.view. This is like the main starter. And here it is. It has here the demo with auto imports. And here's actually it has some input field. And as you can see here on the left side, here this is like some input field here. And there's some button, this U button, it's basically a component provided by the Nuxt UI component library. So this is a ready-to-use component. And if you click on it, it just does a simple message here. Hello Nuxt input field, it showed me my message. So it did basically here fire up this function, say hello. And say hello actually is a function which was provided here by Composable, which is just like a neat way to provide a helper function to components. But I guess more important and interesting is here, like here is the custom input component, which is used like here. And of course you can like very easily like extend that. So for example, I already prepared here. So in this demo environment, there's also like the icon module and the tailwind module up and configured. So you can like basically do like markup like this, and it will just render it and show it on the right side. So here is the icon. It's like the Drupal icon. So if we change it, you will see it goes away, and it also has like Drupal inside. Here the classes is just Tailwind, so I made the text a little bit larger and made it blue. Can also have a red Drupal if you prefer. So, but I guess what makes it more interesting is to maybe create a new component and say, like, I don't know, let's do like a Drupal icon. I mean, you don't need it, but just for the demonstration purposes, let's do a Drupal icon.view. And all you need really is the template. And then I could just go and move that over. And instead of using it here, I can now just use my Drupal icon. And here it is. And I can also pass like some additional classes here, and it will merge it I don't know, let's say, add some additional margin to the left, and it will just jump over and also to the top. Yeah, that's it. So quite convenient to work with, I would say. Any questions to that, maybe?
Why the icon is red?
You're right, it should be blue. Drupal is blue. Okay. So where are we? Everything I think that you need basically for front-end development is there, or there's a Nuxt module available. So I think like developer experience is pretty great. So I think that's quite convenient to work with, in particular, considering it's the same technology, server-side, client-side. You don't have to think about that boundary so much anymore. It's just the same way of working with it. So you can just write the HTML, the CSS as usual. You don't have to know JavaScript for doing that. I mean, like for defining some props, it's just syntax. You can then, of course, embrace some view if you like, but you don't have to. But I think, yeah, it's pretty powerful. But you may wonder, yeah, aren't JavaScript frontends bad for performance? So I think that question really relates also to how you actually render your JavaScript and how you serve it to your visitors. So I would like to go a little bit into the rendering modes available for JavaScript frontends, or in Nuxt in particular. So the Nuxt rendering modes are basically, first off, client-side rendering, which is the most simple one, which means there's no server involved. Basically, when you build your application, Nuxt will just generate a very simple static index HTML, which also contains the JavaScript. So it's basically empty, just loads your JavaScript and then runs Nuxt in the browser and does everything in the browser. You can use that if you'd like to run a complete application, like, I don't know, an internet, where it's not important to have SEO or a big or the best first load performance. It might really be good enough for that. But then, as said, like server-side rendering might be really convenient for the other use cases, like where SEO is really important. There, like everything would be just rendered on the server, and like a server returns like a proper, fully rendered HTML website, which is great for initial load performance. So like also like users, they get to load the whole website, and then they already see everything, and only later on the JavaScript kicks in. So it's also great for the first load performance. Then there's also static site generation. That's basically the approach where like everything is pre-built at build time. So not only the Nuxt application, but it would also go for all your routes and pre-build all the sites and into static HTML. But it's quite actually nice for smaller content sites, I would say, because then you can very easily host it statically. But the most robust and most cheap way to serve sites like this, right? And still, you can have some interactivity with JavaScript while doing that, of course. Then there's hybrid rendering. That's actually a nice option of Nuxt, that you can mix the approaches together. You can like deploy a server, but still have some routes which are like pre-rendered at build time. So if you like, you can really mix and match by route. But for server rendering, I think it's actually quite important when you work with it that you understand how server rendering actually works. So first off, the pages are like pre-rendered on the server, or rendered on the server actually. So when the user loads the page, it already gets the fully rendered website. The page is transferred to the browser. It's rendered in the browser. As you mentioned before, the user already sees it. It has the CSS, the HTML, everything is there. Then the JavaScript loads. And once the JavaScript is loaded, also the Nuxt app is loaded in the browser, and then it hydrates. That means it's actually the Nuxt app is started, and it continues to run then where it stopped running at the browser. And from there on, the Nuxt app runs in the browser and will have the full interactivity, reactivity from Vue.js when you want it and when you need it. So hydration, what is that? It's actually really the process and like the thing that makes Nuxt resume in the browser. The way it works is that basically when Nuxt has rendered the page on the server, is that it also ships the data that it used to render the page to the client. So it records that payload, and that payload will just be transferred to the client as JSON. Then on the client side in the browser, then the app is rerun with that payload. So that means the whole Vue components and everything is instantiated again, and it's so-called mounted to the DOM. So it means the Vue component, it's instantiated in a JavaScript runtime, and it's also mounted to the DOM elements which are already in the HTML. And once that is done, then the app is considered active and running, so then it's fully hydrated. So that's also good to know that this works, because there's also like a thing that can come up with applications like Nuxt, which is a hydration mismatch, which can happen to you if you, for example, write non-well-formed HTML. Like, for example, if you have a table element, like within like a table row, you can only have like the table cells. If you violate that, the browser will repair actually the markup for you, but that's not done on the server side. So then actually the markup which is produced on the server side and which is produced on the client side, it won't match anymore, and this is the hydration mismatch. So if you run into hydration mismatch problems, it's probably due to that. So it's that's something good to know and to be aware of. Yeah, so what are some of the Nuxt features else that are available? I guess it's generally good to know what it's there, so I'd like to give you a little bit of an overview of also what it's there, although you don't have to use it, of course. There are plenty of features available, but you rarely have to use everything, I guess. But of course, when you need something, it's good to know what is there. First off, something which is actually done behind the scenes for you is the bundling magic. So Nuxt, of course, bundles the JavaScript and the CSS efficiently, so the generated markup and HTML application is performant. And it does that by using Vite by default, or you could also like opt to using Webpack. But the nice thing is actually it abstracts that away for you. So you don't have to take care of configuring Vite usually, unless you want to customize it. It's just really good production ready configured out of the box. And it's also configured in a way it's efficient in that it does automatic code splitting by route automatically. So if you define multiple routes in Vue, it will automatically take care of making JavaScript chunks for the dedicated routes. And also, like if you have some components which you might want to decide to lazy load, it will also take care of making a separate chunk for that. So that's quite convenient and really no configuration needed there. So, like, what are the things available in Nuxt? So the main concepts, I would say, first off, components, Vue components, of course. We've seen that. Also composables, we already seen, like it's basically reusable Vue helpers. It's also something you can very easily use in Nuxt. Then there are these pages, the controller components, which auto-register the routes. Then there's also a special thing called layouts. Now, layouts is basically like a site template, like a page template, if you like, which has the header, the footer, the things of your site which are not changing by route. And you can have, like, basically register multiple layouts and then switch it by route. Also quite handy if you need that. Then there's a feature called server routes, which basically is very neat for like making API endpoints as part of your Nuxt server. Nuxt plugins are like a separate thing which allows you to run code whenever the Vue application starts. Particularly handy also if you need to register some additional Vue plugins or something like that. Then middleware is a thing which is run before navigating to a new route. So this is a special, because you have client-side navigation. It also runs if you navigate on the client side, but also it runs the first time on the server. So that's that middleware. It's always server client side, but then server middleware is a special thing which runs only on the server before a request is handled. So this is like middleware as you would know it from Drupal. Nuxt hooks, yeah, something familiar for Drupal as well. Yeah, you have hooks to hook into the Nuxt lifecycle. So if you want to extend it, customize some things, there are a couple of hooks available for that, which in particular then are handy when you write and want to develop Nuxt modules. So you can use the Nuxt modules to implement those hooks, but also with Nuxt modules you can all provide all of the other things basically. You can provide components, plugins, middleware. So a Nuxt module basically is a reusable NPM package which allows you to package some Nuxt functionality up as a reusable module and expose some configuration options, of course. Yeah, that said, extensibility via modules obviously is a big thing, which we have already seen with the use cases. It's quite handy, and there's also a big ecosystem of open source modules available. So there's the registry at nuxt.com/modules where everyone can just register his own modules. And there are also some official modules which are maintained by the Nuxt team. Some of those you have already seen, like the image module or the fonts module. But there are also more there's an ITN module for multilingual websites, or there's this Nuxt UI module which adds in a special Nuxt UI component library, which is also maintained by the Nuxt team. But of course, there's also many useful community modules, there's, for example, Nuxt JSON API module, which is a JSON API client, or there's this Nuxt.js Drupal CA module, which is one of the modules that we are maintaining. It's connecting Nuxt to Drupal via custom elements. Another thing that Nuxt has available and is maybe not popularly used, but can also be quite handy, is Nuxt Layers. Nuxt Layers is basically a possibility to reuse Nuxt apps or parts of Nuxt apps across projects. So you can basically, when you have a Nuxt application, just say, okay, extend this other Nuxt application. And you would do it as you would see here, with that extends key in the configuration. You basically can just locally refer to another layer, or also to layers published at NPM or at GitHub. So that's actually handy for doing reusable things, maybe you want to package up some reusable themes and use it on multiple websites. Or maybe it's also just if you have a very large code base and you want to organize your code more nicely, you can split it up into multiple layers and just also develop it in one repository. For the Nuxt server-side thing, there's a special server engine developed by the Nuxt team, which is called Nitro. Basically, it's the server which is used by Nuxt internally, and it serves the routes and the API endpoints. And also, when you run Nuxt in server mode, it does trigger the server-side rendering of your Vue.js application and everything. It's serverless and edge compatible, what's quite handy. It's possible because it's very efficient. So the produced JavaScript is very tiny, and it even does something like code splitting on the server. So every route and everything is very optimized to test the smallest memory footprint possible, and all the things. So that way, it's also possible to deploy it on serverless environments. For example, I don't know, S2 functions or Cloudflare workers. It's also platform agnostic. So that said, it's like same thing. You can run it on Node.js server, but also like in some other edge runtime. The Nitro server engine, it's part of the ArmJS ecosystem. That actually is an interesting ecosystem which is also maintained and was started by the Nuxt team. It's a collection of JavaScript utilities. It's exposing reusable packages, and they figured like Nuxt is solving lots of problems. Why not just expose it as generally usable packages so everyone can use it? And they just started doing it, and that way they also created Nitro. And it actually really took off. It's becoming quite popular, and many of those packages are used like everywhere in the JavaScript world. And Nitro specifically, for example, is used by Astro for the server-side rendering part, also like by Solid Start, another JavaScript framework. So it's quite nice actually that this is working out so well. Yeah, but you might wonder now, how can you use Nuxt together with Drupal? Yeah. So let's take a quick look at that. First off, you can just use Drupal as any other system with Nuxt. You can just use custom data fetching to fetch some data from Drupal and then render it with Nuxt. So this is how you would typically do it, like in, for example, in a page component, but can be every kind of view component. There's like the composable provided by Nuxt use fetch, which is basically a simple HTTP client, which then also parses the JSON, and like in this example, like just an API of articles, and then makes it available. So with the articles JSON, you can just work as usual then in your template, like loop over it, render it. So of course, like that's a simpler example, but I guess it gives you an idea. Yeah, but the issue basically with that kind of thing is, I mean, it's easy to get started like this, but if you think about a whole application, if you want to have like everything, like, I don't know, SEO, metadata, or maybe a login, there's always a lot of things to develop, right? And Drupal already gives us a lot. And if you do like a decoupled application, this is always a little bit of a problem that we are throwing so much away. And this is really why actually we started with Lupus decoupled Drupal, the decoupled Drupal stack that we are developing, with the idea in mind that we keep using as much as possible of like what Drupal already provides us. And basically what our stack does, it gives like a fully integrated solution with, by default, the Nuxt frontend. You can also use others, but Nuxt is the primary default frontend we are developing also as first-class frontend with it. And the way it works is basically that it renders every Drupal page just in a JSON response. So it's like for every Drupal route, like if you would do /blog with a view, you can basically then get a JSON response of that route, and served with like in an array of high-level frontend components, which in our case are the custom elements. So that way, Drupal keeps in control of many things like paths, path aliases, routing, metadata, or the caching logic, that all just stays there. And also we introduced recently a new thing, custom elements UI, which actually makes it possible to use it as a low-code solution. So with custom elements UI, you have something like manage display on an entity. You also have like manage custom elements, where you can just then configure how you would transform an entity view mode into those custom elements, high-level components. So basically, you can configure then how you would like the data output so that your Nuxt application can consume it and very easily theme and style it. So the stack supports views, like also it has layout builder support, web form, multilingual, just works as it works. There's nothing really special to do. So quite some things. So if you're interested, just check it out at lupusdecoupledorg. Maybe you can open that quickly. It just has all the information and a bunch of documentation to get you started. So in the end, it's just a Drupal module and the frontend. Yeah, but once you have that up and running, you also need to deploy your application. Like as mentioned, there is, of course, with server rendering, you need a server, so you can just do a Node.js runtime. You can do container deployments with Docker, or as mentioned, Nitro also has the serverless support. You can go serverless with solutions like Versal, Netlify, Cloudflare. There's also Nuxt Hub, which is an interesting solution provided and running by the Nuxt team, which basically is a wrapper around Cloudflare, so makes it more easy to get started and use all the Cloudflare tools. You can also use AWS Lambda, Azure Functions, or like with static generation, you can just use your own web server, Apache Nginx to serve the static files, or of course also go with the vendors like Netlify, Versal, also Cloudflare Pages is nice, which helps actually with the build part. So you have like a webhook that you can trigger to build and statically generate your application whenever it's needed. What's then convenient, like when you have like an editor making changes, you can ping the webhook, so it's then at least triggered automatically. For that deployment, Nuxt has deployment presets, so basically you can just configure then your type of deployment, and that then usually just works with that out of the box. But there are also like a lot of available deployment presets for the different deployment solutions, so you can check that out at nuxt.com/deploy. For performance optimizations, I mentioned already, there's also the possibility to lazy load heavy components. So you can do that by just having the lazy prefix when you use a component. So then when it's used conditionally, then Nuxt will make sure if it's not used, it's not loaded, and only if it gets used, then it gets loaded. Then there's also this hydration process I mentioned before. So this is also something which has a lot of room for optimization, because you can imagine like replaying the whole JavaScript application in the browser. Depending of the application, it can become resource heavy also. So then it makes sense to, for example, only hydrate things that are visible immediately, and then like the other things, hydrate them when they become visible. So that now Nuxt has built in as a feature, like very recently in the Nuxt 3.16, this was introduced, and you can just add this directive, hydrate on visible, and it will just do it like this. Or also, like for the mobile menu, it might be convenient to only hydrate it when it's actually used, so you can hydrate it based upon a media query, also quite handy. For debugging, also Nuxt comes with a built-in solution, the Nuxt developer tools. You just need to enable it like this in the configuration, and then it will actually appear in the browser of Nuxt as a small icon, and once you click on it, it will load the whole developer tools, and it has lots of really handy things to introspect your Nuxt application. Most notable, it has a component inspector. You can inspect all your Vue components and the state of them, change the data. You can inspect the payload, make performance analysis, lots of things, so quite handy. For testing, there are the Nuxt test utils provided, which basically are helpers around unit testing, but also end-to-end testing. So for unit testing, by default, it makes use of vtest, and it has helpers for, in particular, testing components. For end-to-end testing, it has Playwright, but I think you can also use Cypress. And as mentioned, it has just have a bunch of very handy helpers. So when you would like to use that, it's best to just take a look at the documentation. It has a couple of useful examples. But maybe to get an idea, here's like one example, unit test for testing a component. Basically, here it makes use of a helper, the mount suspended, and you can just say, okay, I want to mount the test route here, and then basically do some expectations on the returned HTML. So it's also quite simple to just test some component to work correctly. Yeah, finally, Vue and Nuxt are also true open source projects like Drupal. It's really community-driven development. It's not like there's one big commercial entity owning the project. No, they are both like independent. And also they value accessibility and progressive enhancements. So I think actually they are quite good fit for Drupal, and I like the combination actually. Yeah. So if you're interested, I also like added a couple of resources for you. So like most notable, there's Nuxt.com, as you might already know it. Like it has great documentations. It is the index of the modules is there. It has a bunch of examples which you can just launch in StackBlitz. It has the API reference. The code is hosted on GitHub, so you can go to GitHub to see all the code, the issues, and the releases. Then for Vue.js, there's Vue.js.org, which also, of course, contains documentation. What might be worth a try is like learn.nuxt.com, which is an interactive tutorial, which is not fully finished yet, but it's also quite handy to get started with it. And if you prefer like video courses, I can recommend masteringnuxt.com, which is also like, it's a paid video course, but also maintained like by the one company behind Nuxt, like Nuxt Labs, which pays a lot of the Nuxt developers. So it's indirectly also like then helps the Nuxt project if you go for the video subscriptions. Yeah, that's my presentation. Thank you for the attention. Any questions? Yep.
What type of apps have you created with, or do you suggest creating with Nuxt and Drupal and not only Drupal or only Nuxt?
Yeah. So the question is, what kind of apps would you suggest building with Nuxt and Drupal, and not only Nuxt or only Drupal? Both. Yeah. I guess it really depends on how you see the things, and there are like lots of opinions out there. But my point of view, it's actually, since it's a versatile framework, we like to use it for every kind of projects, like also for content-heavy sites. For content-heavy sites, the hydration is something you don't necessarily need or want, but you can like optimize it away. And also Nuxt is built in an easy way, so like it's like basically easy to have things optionally and not loaded in your application, and it's still quite performant. So I would actually recommend using it for any kind of like Drupal website, content website, or my application-centric websites. I guess it makes in particular more sense if it's an application than a content-heavy website. But also like e-commerce websites, I think it can do really well in all of those use cases. Also there are like modules for progressive web applications, that kind of thing. So if you want to have a more app-like experience, that's also something you can do nicely. So I guess it's also a matter of preference, but since like the front end is just very easy to work with, and also like with the stack we built, it's easy to connect it with Drupal. So I don't think there's like a big hurdle you have to get over to get started using it. So I can recommend it for any kind of things. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All that, do you have any experience on that, and also on unpublishing and workflows in general? When you unpublish a page, admins to access it, all that. Do you have all that issues as well? Or?
So to quickly repeat the question, so the question is about when working with Next and Drupal, or generally with modern frontends and Drupal like this, I guess the issues are often like around redirects, cache tags, and also admin experience, unpublished content that you get, basically you have issues with that it's not working. And yeah, I've experienced with that, and I would say this is why we built our stack, and the stack this way, because we solved it once there. In the way we still shifting all this work back to Drupal, So in our stack, like basically redirects, it's still handled by Drupal. It's a redirect API response, which then is just applied by Nuxt. So the redirects are still controlled by Drupal, or like authentication, the cookies is forwarded to Drupal, so Drupal still does authentication session handling, and that way we can just also do like a login and have like the login working on the website. That way we have unpublished content on the website as usual. So that kind of things we just have then working with the environment. What else? Cache tags. Since we, like with Lupus decoupled Drupal, it's a page-oriented API, so it's still Drupal taking care of the page response, so it also takes care of cache tags, so it still works the same way it works as it works with the regular Drupal cache tag system. So we are just using it as with traditional Drupal. Yeah.
Sorry, a follow-up question. But when you say Drupal cache tags, you know, you mean, let's say we have we update a news page, you know, and we have a /news page and it's listing there. So the /news page also needs to be revalidated, right?
Yes. So basically what we are doing is we are passing through the cache tags. So in the front end, we have the same cache tags as in the backend. And then we just send the purge request to both zones, the backend and the front-end zone. Or we actually only cache in the front-end and just send it to the front-end zone, because this is where all the traffic goes. That works quite nicely. So the Nuxt.js Drupal elements connector module that we built, that we basically connects Nuxt to the API provided them by Drupal. It has some configuration options on which headers to forward. And by default, it takes care of like forwarding the cookie headers, so you can just log in and have the cookie. But I guess like CDN tag, or like if you have a special header for that, you can just add it to the list of forwarded headers, and then it will be also in the front end, and that way you can purge immediately. So then we don't do like caching in the front end. We move the cache into the CDN, like have it in the CDN, but like you could also theoretically do like embrace cache within Nuxt, have like, I don't know, Redis cache for your pages and do it in there. So we don't do that because that you would have to integrate with cache tags. But once you do it on like on a CDN layer, it works quite nice. Yeah, I think we are over time anyway, and thanks a lot.